Hi everyone, this is Mrs. King, and I finally got audio working on one of the school laptops, believe it or not, so we'll get this posted. Today is day one of the Integumentary system, and with all the systems that we go through, the first thing that I'm always going to start with are the functions. So, to begin, the functions of the integumentary system. Of course, the integumentary system is the skin, hair, and nails. The first one is protection. The skin protects us from pathogens entering in. It prevents us from dehydration, and also protection from UV light exposure, although some people are better protected than others, and there's more of that to follow. A second function is sensory perception. We have nerve endings that come up into the skin and allow us to respond to pain, of course touch, pressure, vibration, and then heat and cold as well. The third function is body temperature regulation, and there are a couple of different ways that this happens. The blood vessels can dilate within the skin to lose heat when the body's becoming overheated, or the vessels can constrict to hold heat in. We also have the sweating mechanism that allows us to cool down somewhat in hot weather, and we will be talking about those things as well. The next function is storage of fat primarily in the inner layer of the skin, and we also have storage of glucose, salts, vitamins, and of course water. Another function is absorption, and actually the skin can absorb things that aren't good for us as well, but we're going to talk about the medical applications, which are the absorption of medications. There are hormones, there are pain patches, there's patches for nausea, there are nicotine patches, and these all contain medicine that is absorbed through the skin. Nitroglycerin has been an absorbable medication for many, many, many years. It's, I think, the first one that was on the market that could be absorbed through the skin. So there's lots of new ones being introduced all the time. Then we have excretion as a function. The skin gets rid of excess water. It helps eliminate salt. There are even some waste products that are eliminated through the skin, through the sweat. And of course, we get rid of excess heat through dilation of the blood vessels. Then lastly is the production of vitamin D. And vitamin D is necessary for bone health. And what the skin does is, when we're exposed to ultraviolet light, the skin will manufacture a precursor of vitamin D, and vitamin D is actually made in the liver, but these precursors are needed so that when we live in a climate such as Michigan, and we're covered 3/4 of the year with coats on and things like that, we don't get enough UV light directly to our skin, and so all of our dairy products are fortified. So when you look at a milk carton, you will see that milk is fortified with vitamin D, as are cheeses and yogurts and things like that, so they are fortified. So those are the functions of the integumentary system. Now next we're going to talk about the layers of the skin, and we're going to start, the outermost layer of the skin is called the epidermis. Epi means upon. Dermo, of course, is skin, and is is a noun ending. So upon the skin is the epidermis. What we call the true skin is the dermis, and that's where we have all the structures of the skin. They're found in the dermis. And then depending on who you talk to, the third layer is called the subcutaneous or hypodermis layer, and actually some people don't even think that this is necessarily a layer of the skin, that we only have 2 layers, so I'm including it here with the skin. It is, however, not always included as a layer of the skin, so just so you understand that. So let's get started with the picture here. Now you have the coloring sheet that is very similar to this, and you're providing the color, and I have one that I will give you. Whenever we do an anatomy unit, you are responsible for labeling the different parts, And so please pay particular note to the epidermis and the dermis and the hypodermis on the left side of the picture. And then we will also talk about the dermal papilla, the little muscle, erector pili muscle, the hair follicles, and the two glands that we find in the skin. But more of that is to come. So let's get started with the epidermis. This is the outermost layer of the skin. Remember, epi, upon the skin. Now, it's very cool because the epidermis doesn't have any direct blood supply itself. There are no blood vessels or nerve cells up in the epidermis. So I don't know, when you were younger, I used to like to my mom was a sewer, and put little needles in my fingertips, and you put it through the epidermis, and it doesn't bleed and it doesn't hurt. But that is because of the epidermis. Now, it is made up of 5 individual layers. And we're only going to talk about the outermost and the innermost, but I'm going to give you all 5 of them, of course. So the outermost layer, which we will be talking more about, is called the stratum corneum. The layer below it is the stratum lucidum, and the stratum lucidum actually, we don't have it all over the body. We definitely have it on the palms and soles of the feet to provide extra thickness. There is next the stratum granulosum, followed by the stratum spinosum, and the innermost layer is called the stratum germinativum, and in upper level anatomy classes it's actually probably more commonly called the stratum basale. And so we're going to talk about the outermost, the corneum, and the innermost, the germinativum. So let's start with the germinativum, or stratum basale. This is, like I said, the innermost layer. And there are 3 specialized cells that we find in the stratum germinativum. The one that is in highest concentration is called a keratinocyte, and we'll get into that a little bit more specifically here in a second. We also have melanocytes. Of course, you recognize melano as being black or dark pigmented, and so these are the cells that produce our pigment. And then lastly, we have Merkel cells, and these have are from the nervous system. So let's start with the keratinocytes, and these are the most predominant cells in the stratum basale level. And keratinocytes are constantly dividing, and when they divide, they push upward through the different layers of the epidermis. And they have a specialized protein within them called keratin. If you recall, one of our word parts is kerato, which means hard or horny tissue, and it's derived from this word. And this protein that's produced hardens as the cells travel up through the different layers of the epidermis, and so by the time they get to the outer layer, they're very hard and they give us protection. So these keratinized cells, they push up and up, and they'll be completely hardened and form the stratum corneum, which provides us protection for infection and dehydration. So that is the keratinocyte. It produces a protein called keratin. The next cell we're going to talk about is the melanocyte, and the melanocyte is the cell that produces our pigment. It has a protein in it called melanin. There are actually 3 different kinds of melanin, which we're not really going to get into, but they give us our various skin tones. The amount of melanin that we have in our cells is genetically predetermined from our parents, whether we have a lighter skin, darker skin, red, olive, and it is genetics that give us our skin color and tone. The one that we think of most commonly when we think of skin color is eumelanin, just an FYI, but is the melanin that gives us a darker complexion. So the brown color is caused by eumelanin. And the one thing that will increase the production of melanin, of course, is sun exposure or UV light exposure through a tanning booth or something. And what happens is that the melanin is produced so that the lower levels of the skin will be protected, the structures, from the UV exposure. and so more melanin is produced the more we're exposed to the skin, or exposed to the sun, sorry about that. Then the last cell we're going to talk about is the Merkel cell. And I don't have my cursor, but that little square box there on the right is a little disc that we find between the dermis and the epidermis. And if you look at the little square then in the picture to the left, you can see the little box there, and it is highlighting the Merkel cell, and there's a nerve root that goes down into the subcutaneous level and will take information, but it doesn't actually extend up into the dermis, and that's why we can say that there is no nervous innervation of the epidermis directly. It's right between the two layers of the skin, and that is for tactile reception, or they call it mechanoreception. And that's the Merkel cell. So those are the three cells. Most predominant is the keratinocyte, which has the keratin in it that hardens as it moves up through the epidermis, the different layers. Then we have the melanocyte that produces our melanin to give us our skin tone. And then the third kind of cell in the basement membrane is called the Merkel cell for tactile reception. Then the last layer we're going to talk about is the stratum corneum, and this is the outermost layer of the epidermis. So all the cells, as they are duplicating in the stratum germinativum, push up through the other layers of the epidermis till they finally mature and the keratin becomes hardened, and by that time they're in the stratum corneum, and we are constantly shedding these particular cells. They protect the body, like I said earlier, against bacterial invasion and dehydration, and we're always losing these cells. When we move, we lose cells. When we put clothes on, we lose cells. When we move with our clothes on, we lose cells. So millions and millions of cells are being lost all the time, but they are dead cells. So they start out alive at the bottom of the epidermis, but as they push up, they start to die till they get to the outer layer of the stratum corneum, and we just literally rub them off all the time. And they're always being replaced from below.